the background of Frege is mathematics, and he's trying to create, or he tried to design a a formal language, okay, a symbolic language. Of course, siya yung nauna, marami pang sumunod. So he initiated a kind of, let's say, transition, no, from the traditional Aristotelian logic to a quantified symbolic mathematical logic. So madaling aralin yung logic na Aristotle, mahirap aralin yung symbolic logic. So Frege, as already mentioned, he is a mathematician, German mathematician, logician, and philosopher. And he worked at the University of Vienna. Doon siya unang nagturo hanggang sa doon din siya natapos ng kanyang career. Although marami, napunta rin siya, nag-aral siya sa iba't ibang mga universities. So, was born November 8, 1848. And Frege was instrumental in the emergence of modern logic and analytic philosophy. So, yung modern logic naman, yung when we say modern logic is different from the traditional logic. And when we say traditional logic, it refers to the logic of Aristotle. Okay? The logic of Aristotle. That's the traditional deductive syllogistic logic. The modern logic is symbolic, mathematical, and formal. Okay? And of course, this modern logic, hindi naman nag-umpisa lang yan kay Frege, because way before Frege, during the time of Leibniz, karoon na si Leibniz ng mga contribution doon sa pag-create ng isang symbolic or universal language na tinatawag ni Leibniz. And modern logic is within the analytic philosophy tradition. Okay? So, sino yung mga nasa analytic philosophy tradition? Well, we have already mentioned many of them. Russell, Wittgenstein, we can also include their Carnap, we can also include their John Venn, we can include their Bowl, and many other philosophers. We can also put in there the Vienna Circle, no? So sila yung nagko-comprise ng analytic tradition. Analytic tradition is different from the existentialist, phenomenologist, British empiricist tradition. No? It's a different set of philosophers. It's also different from the critical theorist. Okay? Although, ngayon may mga overlapping na yung mga philosophies na yan. So Frege's logical works were revolutionary and are often taken to represent a fundamental break, no? The fundamental break from the traditional Aristotelian logic and ushered in modern logic. Of course, now we call it propositional logic or symbolic logic or formal logic. He reconceived the discipline of logic by constructing a formal system which in effect constituted the first predicate calculus. Although, we can say na if we go back to Leibniz, nag-umpisa na itong, and then of course, John Stuart Mill, no? Nag-umpisa na itong movement na ito, no? Within the logical tradition. He invented modern quantificational logic. No? Ginawa niya dito because his background was in mathematics. Yung ibang operations ng mathematics, yung ibang mga proseso sa mathematics, he applied that to logic. So yung function, yung concept ng function, that is a mathematical concept which Frege adapted or used in logical analysis. Okay, so he created the first fully axiomatic system for logic, which was complete in its treatment of propositional and first-order logic, and also represented the first treatment of higher-order logic. Frege developed an analysis of quantified statements and formalized the notion of proof. No, yung mga doon sa pinakita ko sa inyo, mayroong mga formal proofs of validity. So, for example, say, in Aristotelian logic, you only say, Pedro is a man, all men are rational, Pedro is a man, therefore Pedro is rational. Pero, may mga ano yan, paano dun sa ibang mga arguments na hindi lagi all, no? Because it's a generalized statement. All men are rational. Pedro is a man. These are generals. What about when you say some men are rational? How do you express this? How men? How many men? Few, many, several, di ba? Yung particular proposition in Aristotelian logic is between not one but not all. No, because if it is only one, then it's a singular statement or singular term. If it is all, it's universal. In between, they just call it particular. Okay? So, iba yung notations. So, he quantified the statements. Okay, and until today, that quantification of Frege is still accepted by modern logicians. So, Frege then demonstrated that one could use his system to resolve theoretical mathematical statements in terms of simpler logical and mathematical notions. So, simplified. Okay. Frege conceived a comprehensive philosophy of language in order to ground his views about the relationship between logic and mathematics. So, again, background niya mathematics, he wants to apply these mathematical principles to logic. Therefore, gumawa siya ng artificial language, no? Yung tinatawag nating formal language, yung sa discussion natin, formal language, para maiwasan yung nuances, maiwasan yung ambiguity, maiwasan yung double meaning ng natural language. Well, many philosophers find this insight, no, this project of Frege to be insightful, but doon sa kanyang ambisyon na mag-create ng isang klarong system and to show that mathematics could be reduced to logic, he was not successful in that objective. So, mas naging kilala actually ibang mga sumunod na mga philosophers kay Frege, like Russell and Wittgenstein. Although Wittgenstein was influenced by Frege, and Russell corresponded with Frege. So in spring of 1869, so balik natin yung kanyang education. He began studies at the University of Vienna. There he studied chemistry, philosophy, and mathematics, and must have solidly impressed the Professor Ernst Abbe in mathematics, who would later become one of Frege's benefactors. Isang magiging supporter itong si Abbe because in the early years of his teaching at the University of Vienna, yung kanyang pagtuturo ay actually walang sweldo. No? Basta lang magkaroon lang siya ng appointment na nagtuturo siya. Pero yung sweldo coming from the support of his benefactors. So after 4 years, Frege transferred to the University of Göttingen, where he studied mathematics and physics, and also philosophy and of religion under Hermann Lotze, who had made a profound impact on his philosophical views. Late 1873, Frege finished his doctoral dissertation under the guidance of Ernst Schering, and he worked on the paper entitled On a Geometrical Representation of Imaginary Figures in a Plane. So, obviously, mathematics yan. No? And he received his PhD because of this, for this dissertation. Year after, in 1874, with the recommendation of Ernst Abbe, he received a lectureship at the University of Vienna, yung dati niyang school. And doon, turo siya. And since then, doon na siya nag-spend hanggang sa actually mag-retire siya, no, sa University of Vienna. During the first years of his teaching at the University of Vienna, maraming itinuturo itong si Frege, pero actually, it is an unsalaried position. But he had the opportunity to work for his major work in logic. It was published in 1879 under the title Concept Script, no? yung famous na Big Riff Script, no? A formula language for pure thought modeled on that of arithmetic. So he is now trying to uh, uh, apply the mathematical model to logic. Okay. So here, Frege presented for the first time his invention of a new method for the construction of a logical language or a formal language. So ito yung unang attempt to come up with a formal logical language. And upon the publication of itong Becker script, he was promoted to associate professor. And that's his first salaried position. So meron na siyang sweldo. Okay. In the late 1880s and early 1890s, Frege developed new and interesting theories regarding the nature of language, functions, and concepts in philosophical logic, including a novel theory of meaning based on the distinction between sense and reference. Dito siya naging, actually, ito yung mga nakilala na mga works ni Frege. Although during the time of Frege, karamihan ng kanyang mga works ay hardly received favorable comments from his contemporaries. No? Hindi sila masyadong impressed dun sa ginagawa ni Frege. No? So hindi maganda yung naging review, no, sa mga works ni Frege. So these views were published dun sa kanyang mga influential articles. Actually, later na nagkaroon ng nung tinake up na siya ni Wittgenstein at saka ni Russell, yun, nakilala na masyado itong si Frege. Bumalik na yung mga tao, pinag-aralan yung kanyang mga ideas, and of course, he became widely known. So, sense and reference, and yung pinapabasa ko sa inyo, on concept and object. In 1893, Frege finished his magnum opus, yung Grant's Gist, no? The basic laws of arithmetic. That's the original intention was to write this Grand into 2 volumes. So yung nauna niya tinapos yung volume 1. And in this volume, Frege presented his new logical language and proceeded to use it to define natural numbers and their properties. However, Frege's works were again unfavorably reviewed by his contemporaries. And because of the unfavorable reception of his earlier works, Frege was forced to publish the second volume of the Grant's Gist at his own expense. Okay, so kailangan niyang mag-raise ng money, ng pera, to be able to publish itong second volume. So, nagawa niya naman yun, nakapag-raise siya ng pera, but habang nasa publication process yung kanyang volume 2, he received a letter from Bertrand Russell informing him that it was possible to prove a contradiction in the logical system of the first volume of the Grand's Gist. No? Ibig sabihin, because he was trying to develop a system for sets, no? Huwag na tayo pumunta doon kung yung kanyang notion of sets and yung kanyang sets and classes. Pero if you're interested, you can just Google yung tinatawag na Russell's paradox. No? So it's actually, a paradox is a statement which could be both true, false. Diba? Sabi natin, ang isang proposition may truth value. Ang truth value niya is either true or false. Okay? So, A statement can only have one truth value, true or false. It cannot be both true, false. A paradox is a proposition or a statement which could be both true, false. Yun ang paradox. And according to Russell, doon sa system ni Frege, pwede magkaroon doon ng isang paradox. No? So, ibig sabihin, kung ganun yung sistema mo na pwede pa lang, sa sistema mo pwede pa lang magkaroon ng isang ang isang expression na pwede maging true and false, no, yung isang statement. Pwede maging true and false, no? Paradox yun. So, masisira yung system mo. Okay? Because of this letter of Russell, Frege was forced to quickly prepare an appendix in response dun sa paradox ni Russell. And for the next years, he continued to do important work, but at the same time, try to find adequate solution to the paradox. Pero eventually, give up niya kasi parang na-discourage doon si Frege because na-realize niya na tama yung paradox ni ni Russell. Sabi nga ni Frege, parang na-thunderstruck siya doon sa present na discover na paradox ni Russell. Okay? Although hindi naman si Russell ang unang naka-discover talaga noon. Kasi meron ng mga logicians na inaaral yung paradoxes sa mathematics. Pero it was Russell doon sa kanyang Principles of Mathematics who articulated and presented itong paradox nito. Actually, dalawang paradox yun. So around 1906, probably due to some combination of poor health, tapos namatay yung kanyang asawa. Actually, namatay din. Meron silang dalawang anak, namatay din yata na maaga yung kanyang dalawang anak. No? And then, nag-adapt na lang sila. Pero namatay din yung kanyang asawa in 1905. And siguro, because of the frustration of his failure to find academic solution to his paradox, tapos yung kanyang poor reception ng kanyang work, Frege appeared to have lost yung kanyang interest sa pagsusulat. So that between 1906 hanggang sa kanyang retirement in 1918, he published very few works. Of course, during this period, he continued to influence other logicians and mathematicians. And one of those logicians and mathematicians that was impressed by Frege was Ludwig Wittgenstein. Okay. See, Wittgenstein was also interested in mathematics. He actually, I think he studied engineering. Okay. And he wanted to apply mathematics also to logic. No? In fact, yung kanyang Tractatus is again an attempt to come up with a formal language, formal logic. So, Wittgenstein studied the works of Frege and Russell closely. And in 1911, he wrote both of them concerning his own solution to the paradox that Russell presented. Okay, and Frege was intrigued and invited him to Vienna to discuss his views. Okay, and later that year, he visited Frege in Vienna, and the two engaged in long philosophical debate, discussing these paradoxes. And Frege was impressed by Wittgenstein, and he suggested that Wittgenstein go to Cambridge to study under Russell, which Wittgenstein actually did, because pumunta talaga siya he went to Cambridge and corresponded with with Wittgenstein. He actually studied under Wittgenstein, under Russell. In fact, Russell wrote an introduction. So, ang kwento, and we're going to discuss this pag diniscuss naman natin si Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein presented to Russell yung kanyang solution, yung kanyang ideas. Ang impression ni Wittgenstein, walang nakakaintindi dun sa kanyang ginagawa, pero naintindihan ni Russell. Although sabi ni Russell pa, hindi ko rin naintindihan yung sinasabi ni Wittgenstein. But anyway, he wrote a sort of an introduction or preface to the Tractatus of Wittgenstein. Okay? So, connected yung careers ni Frege, ni Wittgenstein, at saka ni Russell. And Frege also influenced another logician, Rodolphe Carnap, who was his student in Vienna from 1910 to 1913. And Carnap also became interested in logic and semantics. Okay, so these are some of the people who was influenced by Frege. In 1924, a year before his death, Frege finally returned to the attempt to understand the foundation of arithmetic. However, by this time, he had completely given up on his logisms, yung kanyang attempt to reduce everything to logic. Concluding that the paradoxes of class, or yung set theory, made it impossible. Dahil yun nga, although later, may mga subsequent logicians was able to solve yung paradox o puzzles, minsan tinatawag yun na puzzles, paradox ni Russell. We will not go into that. Medyo mahabang ano yan. At yung iba dun, sobrang complicated na. You have to have we need to have a very solid background on mathematics para maintindihan na mabuti yan. Okay, so he instead attempted to develop a new theory of the nature of arithmetic based on Kantian pure intension of space. Although yung earlier anti-Kantian anti-Kantian itong si Frege, kasi sa kanya pwedeng yung logic kailangan sa mathematics talaga yan. However, he was not able to write much or publish anything about this new theory, and Frege died on July 26, 1925, at the age of 76. Okay? So, yun ang buhay ni Frege. Naging sikat siya nung sumula, naging widely known itong si Frege because of Russell. Kasi si Russell talaga yung sumikat na philosopher during that time. When he wrote an appendix, Russell wrote an appendix on Frege dun sa kanyang Principles of Mathematics. Okay, so let's talk about yung kanyang system of logic. So we have said that he was trained as a mathematician, and his interest in logic grew out of his interest in the foundations of arithmetic. And early in his career, he became convinced that the truth of arithmetic are logical. The truth of arithmetic are logical. Kumbaga, ang foundation ng arithmetic or na mathematics ay logic. Kumbaga, magpinsan yung dalawang yan. Okay? So, these arithmetic or mathematical truths are actually analytic truth. And in this sense, he agreed with Leibniz, yung concept ng analytics. He subscribed to logism. Not everything can be reduced, can be explained in terms of logic. All truths are logical truths. So, his logism, however, was modest in one sense, but very ambitious. Frege's logism was limited to arithmetic. Yun lang ang kanyang yun ang kanyang pinaka kumbaga, yun ang kanyang cup of tea, so to speak. Unlike others, like Russell, he did not think that geometry was a branch of logic. Okay? Pero yung iba, kagaya ni Russell, it's a branch of logic yan. So mas matindi yung logism ni Russell kaysa kay Frege. However, Frege's logism was also very ambitious, as he believed that one could prove all the truth of arithmetic deductively from a limited number of logical axioms. At actually, yun ang ginawa ni Frege. He developed axiom, logical axioms that can uh, can explain mathematics. So indeed, Frege devoted or himself set out to demonstrate all of the basic laws of arithmetic within his system of logic. No? So yun ang logism ni Frege, that everything can be reduced, everything can not necessarily everything, but arithmetic, mathematics can be demonstrated in terms of logic. Now, another thing is that he also agreed with Leibniz that our natural language was not suited for this task of logism. No? With so many ambiguities, double meaning, nuances, and so on and so forth, it's impossible for natural language to do that. Okay. Now, speaking of natural language and trying to connect that to Aristotelian logic, basically, Aristotelian logic operates within natural language. Okay? It operates within natural language. In fact, if you're going to study Aristotelian logic very closely, it starts with defining terms. It starts with defining terms because this logic of Aristotle is in fact based on what Aristotle called the three mental operations: simple apprehension, judgment, and reasoning. And for Aristotle, if you still remember your study of Aristotle, you studied the organon of Aristotle. Aristotle comes up with notions like univocal term, equivocal term, analogous terms. Okay, analogy to explain the nuances of language. Okay, yung analogy pa lang. Of course, they use this analogy to many things. Analogy of being, right? So it operates under the natural language. So when in the natural language, you use being. So what do you mean by being? By substance. You need to have some kind of a principle to be able to explain that. And one way of doing that is to develop the idea of equivocity and analogy. Univocity, equivocity, and analogy. Okay. Now, in symbolic logic, we don't deal with that. No, we don't deal with analogous terms. We cannot operate with equivocal terms. Terms should always be unambiguous. It should always be clear. It should always be univocal in a sense. No double meaning. Okay. So for him, just like Leibniz wanted to create an artificial language, okay, that would be able to accomplish this task, of demonstrating the basic laws of arithmetic within logic. So he was also wanted to develop something similar to Leibniz calculus ratiocinator or the lingua characterica, yung tinatawag ni Leibniz na universal language, which is actually an artificial language. Yung binary is one is part of that, the foundation of that. Okay? So here, a logically perspicuous language in which logical relations and possible inferences would be clear and unambiguous. So Frege's own term for such a language, yun nga, yung Begriff script, was widely borrowed from a paper on Leibniz ideas. So yun ang naging basehan niya, itong concept na yung kanyang concept na yan. So Frege saw the formula of mathematics as the paradigm of clear and ambiguous writing. Kasi nga naman, sa mathematics, hindi pwede yung double meaning. Diba? Kailangan klaro. One is one. No? Pag ginamit mo yung natural language na one, ano ibig sabihin ng one? Quantity ba yan? Yung one ba yan? Unity ba yan? And so on and so forth. Pag ginamit mo yung many, how many is many? How plural is plural? So kailangan sabihin mo kung many, sabihin mo kung 10, 5, 4, o 100. Hindi pwedeng most of the people. Hindi pwedeng most of the people. Tell me kung ilan talaga yung taong yan. No? Or most Filipinos. Ilan eksakto yung Filipinos? No? Figure. That's how mathematics operates. No? So kailangan clear, ambiguous, exact. No? Yung exactness ng mathematics. Well, of course, from our studies, hindi lang naman sila ang na-impress sa mathematics because of its exactness and clarity. You go back to Descartes, you go back to the other philosophers, Spinoza, and even Leibniz, of course, Leibniz and John Stuart Mill. They were impressed by the clarity, by the exactness, by the unambiguity of mathematics. So, yun ang gustong sundan din Frege. Okay? So Frege's brand of logical language was modeled upon the international language of mathematics or arithmetics, and it replaced the subject-predicate style of logical analysis with the notions of function and argument. No? Function and argument. So in mathematics, itong equation, you can see this, x is a function of f equals 2x 2x plus 1. So the f is a function, no? So f function of x, no? Ito, no? So yan. As an argument, so f is function. This parenthesis here, you call this a placeholder. Okay, placeholder. So yung nasa loob ng placeholder, you call that argument, no? You call this argument, okay? Ngayon, sometimes some expressions do not have this, walang content nito, so it becomes an empty space, an empty place, no? Walang laman. So ibig sabihin nun, kailangan mong lagyan ito ng laman yan. Pero yan, meron ng ano yan, di ba? So pero when you say x, it could be any x, no? That's a variable. Result as value to the result of multiplying x by itself, no? X times 2. Mali aking expression dito. Ano ito? Dapat naka superscript ito. No? X cubed to. Anyway, I'll check that. So, in order to make his logical language suitable for purposes other than arithmetic, Frege expanded the notion of function to allow arguments and values other than numbers. So, ito, pinilitan niya ito, hindi lang number ang ginamit niya dito, pinilitan niya yan. Makikita niyo later in the later part of this discussion. He defined a concept, begriff, as a function that has a truth value. So, yung concept, no? It as a function. So, kanina, yung sinasabi natin, like, Manila is a city and UST is a college. So, yung concept natin ng Manila as a city, that's a concept. Okay? It becomes a function that has a truth value. Pwede maging true or false. Siyempre, alam natin, Manila City, ang value niyan ay true. Okay? So, either of the abstract objects, the true or false, yun ang truth value, as its value for any object as argument. No? So, yung argument, remember yung argument, hindi ito yung argument na nakikipag-argue. The argument for Frege is yung nasa loob ng placeholder. Okay? Ah, pero yun nga, kung ano man yung nasa loob ng placeholder na yon ay function yon, no? Function yon. Ibig sabihin ng ano ibig sabihin ng function? Siya yung nagde-determine kung ano yung magiging truth value ng mas malaking statement. So, malaking expression ito, statement or expression ito yan, no? Fx equals 2 squared plus 1. So that is an expression. And yung ito yung mga functions ito, no? Ito function dito kung ano yung value o kung ano yung object na nire-represent ng x. So yung x laging sasabihin sa math, that's a variable. We don't know kung ano yan. 'Di ba? Sa math lagi find the value of x. Okay, find the value of x. What's the value of x? Pero dito sa math, ang value ng x is a quantity. Say the value of x is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But in logic, the value of x is either true or false. So ginamit ni Frege yung concept ng function ng value ng math, then apply that to logic. At least yung paradigm na yan. If you are familiar with the class of barbers who shave only those who do not shave themselves, that's a good example of this Russell paradox, no? A set of barbers who only shave those who do not shave themselves. Meron, so isip ko ng barber na who does not shave but shave himself. Pwede rin siyang kasama doon sa sa group na yon, di ba? Pwede rin hindi. So yung statement pwede maging tama, pwede maging mali. That's the paradox. It can be both true and false. No? Samantalang dapat either true or false lang siya. So let's continue our discussion. Now we focus on sense and reference. Okay, so let's try to simplify itong concept na ito ni Frege. So first of all, Frege was interested in unlocking the identity of expressions. No, when we say expressions, that could be in mathematics, that could be an equation, or in logic, that could be a sentence, an assertion, a sentence, or a proposition. Okay, it could also be just a term or a word. Okay, so take for example the mathematical expression 4 times 2 equals 11 minus 3. Okay, so this expression or mathematical equation expresses an identity through the symbol the plus. Okay, so the equal sign, equal. So it's the symbol equals between 2 times 2 and 11 minus 3. Obviously the answer to that is 8. Okay, but the question for the logicians and mathematicians is, what is the meaning of the symbol equals to or equals? Or what is the meaning of identity? So obviously, 2 times or 4 times 2 and 11 minus 3, they are identical. But what is the meaning of identity in this sense? The mathematicians and logicians disagree on the meaning of identity. No? Because the question is, the expression 2 times 2 and 11 minus 3 mean the same thing. Now, some logicians and mathematicians contend that they could not be totally identical because 4 times 2 expresses a product, while 11 minus 3 expresses a difference. Okay? So although they mean the same, they refer to the same thing, 8, but they have different expressions. Now, for Frege, this is identity proper. Oh, that expression is identity proper because, and those who oppose the identity of the expression confuse form and content. The form and the content. The expression expresses a single identity, but with two different expressions. So 2 4 times 2 stands for 8, and 11 minus 3 stands for 8 also. Okay? Therefore, they have a common reference. Okay, a common reference. They pertain or they denote 8. So the equation, therefore, can be understood as standing for one and the same thing. It refers to one and the same thing. It denotes one and the same thing, and that is the number 8. However, this single entity is determined or is presented differently by the two expressions. Therefore, an expression or sentence expresses a sense and denotes a reference. Okay, so we can say the sense is it's the meaning, but the reference is the denotation. In Aristotelian logic, the distinction is between comprehension and extension. The sense is comprehension, the reference is the denotation. Okay, but of course, it's a different classification altogether. Okay, and in Aristotelian logic, it goes to a different direction. Right now, going back to Frege. So remember the difference between sense and reference. Frege applies this distinction between reference and sense for all linguistic expressions. Right? So he used the mathematical expression to distinguish between the meaning of sense and reference. But he applies this distinction to all linguistic expressions, whether that be natural language or formal language. Okay, so to explain that, he used the expression the morning star and the evening star. So, what is the meaning of this expression, morning star and the evening star? They both refer to the planet Venus. So, they have a common reference in the planet Venus. They express or they refer to Venus, but they express Venus differently because of the different properties that Venus has. In the same way that 8 can be expressed as 4 times 2 or 8 minus 3, Venus can also be expressed differently. But it's one and the same planet Venus. So only one reference. Okay? So for Frege, these two expressions have the same reference but different senses. Okay? Different senses but one reference. The reference of an expression is the actual thing corresponding to it. So in the case of the morning star, the reference is the planet Venus, and also in the case of the evening star. The sense of the expression is the mode of presentation, how it is presented. Okay? So how do we describe? Okay? How do we pick out this object? Oh, how do we present? So, in other words, it's the cognitive content associated with expression in virtue of which the reference is picked out. So, you can say, well, for example, you can say Manila. You can say Manila is the capital city of the Philippines, or you can also say Manila is the most populated city in the Philippines. Okay, only one reference, but two senses. Two different modes of presentation, two different cognitive content. Right? You can say the Blessed Virgin Mary is the Lady of the Immaculate Conception, and the Blessed Virgin Mary is also the Lady of Fatima. All right. So different expressions or different senses. So while the reference is usually an actual object, there are also expressions that do not have an actual reference. Like the examples we have mentioned before, no, a while ago, about Athena, about Pegasus, and so on and so forth. They don't have actual reference. Now, Frege then applies this distinction to identity claims. So consider these two claims again. So you have two claims here. Morning star is the morning star. That's identity. No, you can say that's a tautology. Okay, in logic, tautologous statement. Morning star is also the evening star, or is the evening star. Now, the first statement, the first claim, illustrates the law of identity, which is knowable a priori. Okay, principle of identity. Oh, A is A. Okay, A is A. Principle of identity. The second implies something that is discovered a posteriori, because there is something added. No? Say the morning star is also the evening star. But how do you know that the morning star is the evening star? Well, you have to discover that they refer to one and the same thing. Unlike in the first one, that there is absolute identity. Okay? So, if the morning star means the same thing as the evening star, then the two statements themselves would seem to have the same meaning, both involving the thing's relation to identity to itself. But why is it that two seems to be more informative? Because it adds, okay, another information, another detail, while one does not. Okay, so that's quite of a puzzle, no? Because although they are identical, but one gives more information. Frege's response to this puzzle is based on the distinction between sense and reference. Because the reference of the evening star and the morning star is the same, both statements are true in virtue of the same object's relation of identity to itself. But because the sense of these expressions are different, no? The sense of one is different from two. No? The sense of morning star is different from the evening star. The object, no, in the first claim, is presented in the same way twice. Morning star is the morning star. And in the second claim, it is presented in two different ways. Therefore, it is informative to learn of number two. There's additional detail added in number two, although both are identical because they refer to one and the same thing. So when you say Mary is the Immaculate Conception and Mary is the Lady of Fatima, when you say Mary is the Lady of Fatima and the Lady of Fatima is the Lady of Fatima, that's one, all right? But when you, so Mary is Mary and Mary is the Lady of the Immaculate Conception or Lady of Immaculate Conception. The first one is identical, no? Because they mean one and the same thing. But the second is informative because while Mary, the name Mary applies to Mary, and Immaculate Conception also applies to Mary, there is an issue of additional information. It is more informative to learn. Therefore, while the truth of an identity statement involves only references of the component expressions, the informativity of such statements involves additionally the way in which these references is determined, meaning by the senses of the component expressions. So, identity can be explained in the fact that an expression or two expressions may refer to one and the same reference. So Immaculate Conception, Lady of Fatima, they refer to one and the same thing, or the same person rather, to Mary. But the second, when you say Lady of Fatima is Immaculate Conception, it is more informative because of the different senses, no? The two senses involved in the expressions. Okay. Now, for Frege, the distinction between sense and reference applies also to other sorts of expressions, not just to that kind of expressions, and even to whole sentences or propositions. Okay? Because when you say morning star, evening star, or say Immaculate Conception, Our Lady of Fatima, well, these are not complete sentence or propositions. They are terms, but they are not sentences. Now, the reference of the whole proposition depends on the reference of the parts of that proposition, because the proposition will not be composed of parts, right? Subject, and predicate. Okay? So, and the sense of the propositions will also depends on the sense of the parts of that proposition. And so the sense of the whole proposition is composed of the senses of the component expressions. Okay? So that's the case of propositions. And we know that propositions can either be simple or compound. Okay? So, in the case of compound propositions, now the truth of that proposition, or the sense and the reference of that proposition, that compound proposition, will be based on the sense and reference of the component propositions. So the truth value of the identity claim, whether true or false, depends on the reference of the component expressions. So in our example, the component expression will be the evening star is Venus and the morning star is Venus. So if these two component statements or expressions are true, then the truth value of the compound statement will be true. Okay, so the informativity of what was understood by the identity claim depends again on the senses. No, based on our previous example. No, okay. So whether that is and Frege therefore concluded that the reference of an entire proposition, meaning its truth value, is either true or false, or in the language of Frege, the true or the false. Okay, so the sense of a complete proposition is what we understand when we understand a proposition. Complete proposition. What we understand, no? When we understand a proposition. And the sense or what we understand of a proposition is called by Frege as thought. Thought. The sense, what we understand about a proposition is thought. Okay, or what is understood by a proposition is thought. And it's not how we understand, but what we understand of the proposition is thought. Okay? So let's go now to thought and representation. Now, you know the meaning of a sentence, right? A sentence is, well, an expression that expresses complete thought. Okay, group of words, a word, or group of words that expresses a complete thought. But we know that there are different sentences. There is the interrogative, there is the exclamatory, there is the declarative. Now, Frege and the logicians are concerned about declarative sentence or declarative statement. And thought, okay, so declarative sentence is a proposition, okay? It's an assertion, it's a proposition. So you don't call a interrogative sentence as a proposition. It does not propose anything. It asks, okay? It interrogates. So the thought or the term thought is reserved for a sense or for the sense of a declarative sentence that has as its referent a truth value. Okay? So, if a sentence does not have a referent as a truth value, then no thought. Okay? No thought. So that's why, again, we go back. The base of the truth value would be whether there is a referent objective reality. If there's no objective reality, we cannot determine its truth value. Therefore, that will not be considered as a thought for Frege. So thoughts for Frege are what could be said to be true or false. So if you say there are angels flying around, look around, you cannot see any angel. So there's no way of verifying that. So you cannot say whether it is true or false. Therefore, that cannot be considered as a thought. Okay, so for Frege, that to its truth and falsity are rightly ascribed. So a thought can be true or false. And a thought is the sense or what we understand in a proposition or a declarative sentence. Okay? So, for Frege, thoughts are not produced. They are not formed by those who would apprehend them because thought exists eternally independent of whether they are entertained, understood, or not by anybody. So, the thought of the proposition, for example, Mars is a red planet. The sense of that expression, no, what we understand of that statement is independent of the apprehension of anybody. So apply that to say 2 plus 2 is 4. Whether you understand that or not, 2 plus 2 is 4 will always be true. And 2 plus 4 equals 5 will always be false, regardless whether you understand mathematics or not. Okay? That's an example of thought. So the truth of the proposition, meaning of the declarative sentence, or of the sense of the proposition, is independent of the belief or the mental state or the conviction of the person or of anybody who apprehends the statement or proposition. Okay? That's why we said the truth value is independent of the truth claim of the speaker or of anybody who tries to understand the expression. So, for example, the thought which we express in the Pythagorean theorem, and this is an example of Frege, is timelessly true. True independently of whether anyone takes it to be true. It needs no bearer. Okay, so Frege said that when one apprehends or thinks a thought, one does not create it, but only comes to stand in a certain relation, which is different from seeing a thing or having an idea to what already existed beforehand. No, that's why he differentiates thought from an idea. Idea is subjective. Idea is personal. Thought is not, because that thought can be shared with anyone. The thought of Mars being the red planet can be shared with anyone. Okay, but if you have an idea about uh, I don't I don't feel, even if you declare it this way, I'm not feeling well today. I'm not feeling well today. Well, that's a truth claim, but the truth value of that will never be, we can never determine unless, for example, it's declared by the doctor. Okay? The doctor can say, well, the disease is caused by COVID-19 or the pandemic is caused by COVID-19. Some people don't believe that, right? But whether you believe that or not, the thought of that will be true. Okay? So, that's the meaning of thought for Frege. There are, excuse me, there are declarative sentences, however, whose sense or senses do not have as their reference a truth value. meaning they do not partake in the truth or falsity of the statement. Such a declarative sentence is referred to as representation. And according to Frege, he said, it would be desirable to have a special term for signs having only one sense. If we name them, say, representations, the words of actors on the stage would be representations. Indeed, the actor himself would be a representation. So consider the expression, I'm going outside to take a walk. I'm going outside to take a walk. Now, of course, obviously, that is a sentence with a sense that we can grasp, we can understand, right? It has a sense. Now we can understand what's the meaning of I'm going outside and take a walk. So there's a sense to that. No? We can understand that. Okay. However, it does not have as its referent the circumstance of its being true or false. Because it's rather weird to say the sentence is true or false on the account of the intention of the person to say that he will go out to take a walk. Consider the previous example I gave. I am not feeling well today. What is the reference to that? True or false? Well, uh, is that true or false because he said it? Because he does not feel good today? It could be true or false. I mean, how do you know? So while the person may be a reference of the subject because it's the one who said, I am going, the sentence, while having a sense, because we can understand, does not have a reference. Meaning the same reference as when we say Manila is a city or Mars is a red planet. Okay? And therefore, such expression that does not have any reference, a truth value, is called representation by Frege. And therefore, we can say that the sense of a declarative sentence that has as its referent a truth value is called a thought. And the sense of a declarative sentence that which we grasp with understanding the sentence, but has no relation to truth or falsity, meaning no reference to truth value, it is called a representation. Expressions and function. Frege applied this distinction of sense and reference to incomplete expressions. Okay, incomplete, meaning it's just a term, which includes functional expressions and grammatical predicates. Okay? Alam natin kung ano yung function, di ba? Right. These expressions are incomplete because they contain an empty space, which when filled could yield or result in a complex name referring to an object, or it could be a complete proposition. So expressions can either be complete or incomplete. Pag complete, it calls that saturated. Pag incomplete, unsaturated. Okay. You will see the difference, no? So let's have an example here. For example, the incomplete expression, the square root of, and then you have the placeholder. The parenthesis is a placeholder. Okay, and we have said that if it's empty, right? Empty. So it's incomplete because there is a placeholder, it's empty space. Okay, pagka kumpleto, if it's a complete, then there is an argument. The meaning, well, let's say the square root of 16, for example. No? Square root of 16. Ano nga ba yun? 4? So, it contains a blank spot or space, which when completed by an expression referring to a number, for example, you say, the square root of 4. So, hindi na siya incomplete kasi you know what is the square root of 4. Alright? Ano nga ba yung square root of 4? Hello?
Tudo
Square root.
po daw.
Oh yeah, of course. Two. Philo majors pala kayo, hindi pala kayo sa math. No? Anyway. All right, so the example, the square root of 4, that results to a completed or complete expression. Completed by referring referring into a number. No? So the square root of 4. Okay? By the way, you call this argument, yung nasa loob. Ha? Right. The incomplete expression, ito predicate ito. No? Blank is a planet. Okay? This one, no, blank space, a planet. It contains an empty place or empty space, which when filled up with a name results to a complete proposition. For example, you say, Mars is a planet. Okay? So you have a complete expression and incomplete expressions. Now, according to Frege, the references of these incomplete expressions are not objects. He calls them functions. Okay? Functions. The reference. No? Since hindi mo alam kung, you don't know what will be placed here, it's not really objects, but it's function. Objects, in Frege's terminology, are self-standing complete entities. No? Kagaya, pagka sinabi mo ng square root of 4, hindi na siya magiging function. Okay? Kasi complete sentence na siya. Free self-standing entities. While functions are essentially incomplete or, in his terminology, unsaturated. Okay? Unsaturated. And they must take something else as argument, meaning, kailangan mo, you have to put something, no? You have to place something inside the argument in order for it to yield a value. Meaning, in order for you to know whether it's true or false. Because if it will remain empty, it remains to be a function, it remains to be an incomplete, and you will never know what will be the truth value of that incomplete or unsaturated expressions. Okay? And therefore, the reference of the expression square root of blank is a function. Okay? Is a function which takes numbers as arguments or yields numbers as values. So kailangan, if you want to know this, you have to put either a number, okay, or not a number, of course. If you put there the square root of a, square root of a, well, you put there, but it will not give you, it will give you a truth value, of course, but the truth value will be false, right? So it is somewhat different in the case of grammatical predicates like the one we use. Blank is a planet. Okay, that's different. Now, well, because the other one is a number, the other one there are many other things you can put into that. No. Now, Frege holds that complete propositions like names, no, for example, Mars is a planet, have objects as their reference. No, andyan na, no? And in particular, the truth value either true or false. Okay? So he is able to treat predicates also as having functions as their references. In particular, there are functions mapping objects onto truth values. So for example, again, the example, blank is a planet. We said that its reference is a function of what will saturate or what will be placed inside the placeholder. If it will be saturated, meaning we put there an object like Saturn or Mars. So say Saturn is a planet or Mars is a planet. Then it will be a true expression. But if it will be saturated or you replace a name of a person or animal, then the expression is false. So if you say a bird is a planet, so you put the argument bird in that, no, saturate it with that name of a bird, then it is going to be a false statement. So whatever you put there is a function, meaning it will determine the truth value of the total expression. Right? So Frege calls a function of one argument which yields true or false for every possible argument a concept. No? So what? So if, for example, uh, you say Saturn is a planet, it's a concept. Okay, but similar functions of more than one argument place, meaning marami ka pang sinabi doon. No, hindi lang let's say uh, if Saturn uh, is one of the heavenly bodies that circles the sun, then it is a planet, no? Ibig sabihin, maraming argument ka nilagay doon, no? Denoted by ito, ginawa niya example. Then he calls that relations. Okay? Kasi marami ka pang titingnan sa loob. But if you just say Saturn is a planet, then it becomes a concept. But if you say consider this object, if it circles the sun and one of the circling objects in the sun, then it is a planet. It's not a concept, but a kind of relation. Okay. So from the foregoing, we can see that in Frege's logic, sentences in singular terms are either complete or saturated expressions, and predicates are incomplete or unsaturated expressions. And all terms and well-formed formulas or sentences are denoting expressions. They have reference. Okay? They have reference. Now, these include a simple name of objects like 2, 3, or planet, or Mars, or complex terms which denotes objects like 2, the square root of 2, or 2 cubed, or 3 plus 1, or sentences which are also complex. So the complex term in B, this is this one, and C are formed with the help of incomplete expressions, the one that we discussed, which signifies functions such as the binary, a squaring function of blank squared, and the binary addition function of blank plus blank. In these functional expressions, this blank is used as a placeholder, or what Frege called the arguments of the function. So whatever you place here is the argument of the function. No? What you saturate, what you put inside is the argument of the function. The placeholder reveals that expressions signifying function are incomplete. Well, because there's no value here. There's no, it's empty. It stands in contrast to complete expressions such as those in A, B, and C because they have their own complete expressions. So let's have some examples here. And this is my last point. So consider this example. Mars is a planet. That is a complete expression. And it can be true or false. Okay? Now suppose I say, I put here, January is a planet. Well, that is also a complete expression. Because there is a January. However, it is a false statement. Okay? Because while there is January, that's the reference, but January is not a planet. It is a month. Okay. Now, suppose blank is a planet. Since it's blank, it is an incomplete expression. And its truth value, whether true or false, is a function of the object that will saturate the placeholder, meaning what will be placed inside this. So if you place Mars inside this, then the expression is true. But if we put apple is a planet, then it is a false expression. Just the same. So here, whatever you put inside, whether Mars or apple, that will be a function of this statement. Square root of 2, 2 cube rather. 2 squared is 4. That is a complete expression, and it can be true or false. Of course, in that sense, it is true. But if you say cube 2 raised to the second power, or uh, 2 cube, and you say is 6, then that is a false statement. So here, blank plus blank is 4 is an incomplete expression. And its truth value is a function of the object that will saturate the placeholders here and here. So if 2 and 2 here, 2 plus 2, then the expression is false. But if we saturate this with 3 and 3, then the expression is a false expression. Right? So this is a truth functional statement because its truth will depend on this, on the value or the object that will be placed in this placeholder.